As you may have heard by now, Hytale has been cancelled. If you don't know what Hytale is, it's a game that was announced in 2019. The trailer released in 2019, and it was made by Hypixel Studios, the people that run the popular Minecraft server Hypixel, which is currently the most popular Minecraft server, and it has been 6 years since the trailer came out, and we've had absolutely nothing actually release. They've had a lot of blog posts show up that they've made. They've had they've talked about it on like Twitter and stuff. They've released video of the game, but it doesn't exist. So I'm going to be talking about what I believe the reason for all that is and how it could have been avoided. So first off, there is a post. Where did it go? So they said in this one post, which is, the image isn't loading for some reason, 5 months after the game was, after the trailer dropped, 5 months after the trailer dropped, they announced that they were expanding the scope of the game, and this is their first mistake. Here it says, the success of the announcement trailer has opened doors and raised the stakes in equal measure. It's been amazing to watch a community form around the game and see our work discussed in videos and social media, etc., etc. Thanking everyone for their support. The massive number... Wait. The scale of the response has also presented challenges. We've had a lot of work to do, from improving our development pipeline to processing thousands of job applications, etc., etc. Here we go. With this amount of attention comes a huge amount of pressure to get the game right. We firmly believe that the best thing we can do is take advantage of all the resources at our disposal and make the game as good as it possibly can be. Further on it says, we believe that it's better for a game to wait for a game that lives up to expectations than to get hyped for a game that turns out to have been released too early. And, I agree with that, but it's better to release it too early than not to release it at all. So basically, they had an idea of what they wanted the game to be, their original idea, before they released the trailer, before anyone but the dev team knew about it, all that stuff. And they expanded the scope of the game once they realized how popular it was. The trailer got 61 million views, which is a lot. And so because of this, they started feeling pressure to make the game perfect, to live up to the hype. But the thing is, we weren't expecting a perfect game. We were expecting what was shown in the trailer, which was, the original idea they had for the game, the original plan. But then they decided, well, because it's getting so popular, we're going to need to make it way better and way bigger in order to satisfy the fan base. But in doing so, they ended up putting it into development heck, which ended up with it being cancelled. And so the problem was that they should have just stuck to their original idea. Like, before they made the trailer, or before they released the trailer, they had an idea in their heads of, okay, this is what we want the game to be. They should have just stuck with that instead of trying to change it. I mean, it doesn't really make sense to show the people what your game is going to be like, and then they love it, and then you're like, oh, Well, in that case, let's change it. I mean, yeah, they were trying to make it better, but we didn't ask for that. We asked for what was in the trailer. And if we look at the trailer, it has quite a lot of stuff shown here. So already we have world gen, characters, animations. That's a bit loud. We have mobs, world gen, characters, animations, blocks, potentially farming and crafting and building. Actually, definitely had building. It's possible that a lot of this could have been animated, but I don't think so, because generally you don't release a trailer that looks this much like what the actual gameplay was shown to be without actually showing gameplay. See, this looks like gameplay right here. This looks very much like gameplay. Here we see actual building being done. We see the boss. You know, there's all sorts of stuff we're seeing here, and so clearly they had quite a bit actually finished by the time they released the trailer. And I know that I know it looks like a complete game, and that's not, like, a lot of times games will seem more finished than they are based on the trailer, but I mean, they clearly had something here. And look, they have multiplayer. Either that, or again, they just animated it. And if they were just animating like 90% of this, then it clearly, if that were the case, then that would mean it's far too early for them to actually release a trailer. And if it was all in game, then clearly that means that it's a lot closer to completion than warrants a 6-year continued development. And here it shows their in-game modding tools, which look, they clearly put a lot of effort into this. I mean, look at all this. They have a lot of stuff here. And again, the only possible explanation I can think of for why they took so long after having all this is if this was just animated and like a proof of concept, not actually finished. But I don't think that's the case. Look at this, they even had a fully made character customizer. They had a thing where you could play videos in the game itself. They clearly had quite a lot, so I don't know why. I do know why. Basically what I'm saying is that there's no excuse. Because clearly they had quite a bit here, and then if we look over here, back on the blog, we've got 2024, 2025, and here we see that they have 110 people. That is way too many. Like, if you look at Cube World, which is a game that's probably smaller in scope, but still quite advanced, the alpha anyway, that was made by one guy, and his schedule was actually a little faster than these guys. Maybe not faster, maybe just felt that way, but he released the game, like, he made a game that you could actually play, so that automatically puts him ahead of the Hytale team. If they have, actually it says more than 110, that's a weirdly specific number to say more than. I don't know what that means, but somewhere along the line they mentioned that they are changing the engine because they changed their mind, decided we don't just want to launch on PC, we want to launch on PC, console, and mobile all at the same time. which basically triples their workload because they have to develop 3 versions of the game simultaneously for 3 different platforms that work together. And they didn't want to release the game until all of those were done, which is clearly overextending themselves. Also, it says the gameplay team consists of 3 engineers, 2 tech designers, 2 quality analysts, and 1 producer. I don't know what the other 100-ish employees were doing, but clearly not much. I mean, I don't know if they're including like coders or anything here. It says 2 tech designers. I don't know if that means coders or what. So there's probably a lot more that were actually making the game. And I can't find the post here. But at some point they mention... Oh, here we go. Is this it? Yep, I think this is it. Okay, they're talking about their new engine. So, here we go. In our winter 20... Let's see. So they're talking about they want the game to live up to the expectations of the community at launch and beyond. So it says that we've made the decision to redevelop Hytale's engine, both the client and the server, in C++ instead of Java and C#. This provides benefits, makes it easier for us to release Hytale across multiple platforms, provides performance benefits, and makes it easier to patch and maintain the game in the future. Basically what they're saying is that they deleted all their code and started over completely in a different language, which in and of itself, telling the coders, oh yeah, you know all that work you spent for the last several years, yeah, that's all gone now, start over. Oh, and you gotta use a different language too this time. We appreciate that this might be a source of concern for some, and it turns out that I was completely correct. So basically they overextended themselves. Our previous engine was built at a time when we had fewer resources and hadn't come to terms with the scope of what we were trying to achieve with Hytale. So, again, they were aiming too high, flying too close to the sun, they got Icarus'd. Now, they also were acquired by Riot. I believe they were the people that made League of Legends. Let's see if we can find that. Let's see, Hytale fan art, progress update, graphics update, music, more fan art. I think it's here, a new era. See if we can find that. Yeah, Hypixel Studios is being acquired by Riot Games as an independent studio. So, this is just a theory, but I think that Riot getting involved, I can't imagine that they wouldn't have any say in the game's development after acquiring Hypixel Studios. Just like with Microsoft acquiring Minecraft and Mojang, they clearly had influence on it. Like all those Minecraft sketches about if Microsoft bought Minecraft and then they turned out to all be completely true. And again, these are the same people that made League of Legends, so clearly they don't really know what they're doing. Noxie will take my place as the new CEO of Hypixel Studios. Now, I'm not encouraging hate towards anyone here. Please don't hate on anyone. That's not good at all. There's been some recent events showing just how tragic the consequences of hate and online bullying can be, so please don't do that. But this may have been one of the problems, that they changed the guy that was the main dude working on it, or the main dude focusing on it. It mentioned that he was at the heart of Hytale since the beginning. So, in and of itself, that's probably not a huge deal. But I saw a post on Twitter from one of the people who was working for Hypixel Studios, and they said that at first it was just a small team working on something that they loved for passion, which is great. That's perfect. That's what we need. But then, as the studio started growing, they ended up having a bigger team, and they spent more time talking about the game than actually working on it. And so their scope and their plans got bigger and bigger and more complicated. And you ever heard the saying, too many chefs spoil the soup? That's what happened here, I think. I think that they just got too ambitious. They got too many people working on it. I've heard that when you have too many like coders and developers working on a game, then they're often working on completely separate things from all the other teams, and that often makes it difficult for them to work together because they're all working separately on separate things, and then they have to stitch all those separate things together, which is not something that you have a problem with when everyone is on the same track. Which is why games with smaller dev teams, like indie games, tend to do so much better. Now, I also want to talk about Silksong, because the trailer was released at the same time, and it's taken as long to come out, except that for now we have a speculated, not 100% confirmed, release date for this year. And they've said that before, but hopefully this time it'll be different. And at the very least, they haven't given up yet. And Team Cherry actually has something to show for what they've done, because we already have Hollow Knight, an entire actual game that was made and can be played, which is more than we got for Hytale. So I want to talk about some of the blog posts. The blog posts, in my opinion, were very poorly made. They have a lot of, you know how when someone writes like when a company releases some kind of statement and it looks like it was written by ChatGPT, and a lot of times it was. Well, this started even before ChatGPT, and people have always been making very overly corporate, sanitized, very scripted, overly happy, cheerful, optimistic kind of posts where they're clearly over enthusiastic about things. They end like half the sentences with exclamation marks, and they always end with something like, the future is looking bright, and then they cancel the game. I've always hated that. I wish the devs would just speak like normal people, because that gives us way more confidence in them. And some of this is fine, but I noticed they spent a lot of time working on the lore and talking about the lore of the game rather than actually showing any kind of progress. That goes back with what I said earlier about them talking about the game more than actually developing it. And I think the reason they were so heavy on talking about the lore is because that was the only thing that they actually had been making progress in. And when I say progress, it basically means that they were just thinking up ideas for... It's not really progress, I don't think you can call it that, because the game wasn't actually being made. It's just them deciding what the backstory will be, which shouldn't be the first thing you come up with. Let me rephrase that. You need to work with gameplay alongside that, at least as much as you're working on the plot. Otherwise, you just end up with a Telltale game that might as well be an animated movie. Like that Conan O'Brien thing where he's playing a game and he says, we haven't touched the controller in 45 minutes. That tends to be what games that are very heavily focused on story end up being, which is fine sometimes, but I'm getting off topic. Essentially, the blog posts didn't really tell us anything. They're all very similar, very... what's the word? Clinical, maybe? Like, they read like a technical document rather than a human being telling you about stuff. We'll share some of these ugly duckling moments when we're out of this awkward self-conscious phase! Exclamation point. This is clearly, they're using fancy terms, well, not fancy terms, but like overly purple prose type stuff, like ugly duckling, awkward face, exclamation point. It sounds fake, and turns out it kind of was. So here they're talking about their lore behind the characters, concept art, more concept art, lots of concept art, very little actual gameplay. Let's look at another blog post. This actually shows pictures from the game itself. That's good. This was one of the earlier ones. None of us has expected this to be such a long project, and we're aware this approach brings its own risks and costs. We're mindful of the dangers of scope creep. Absolutely incorrect, clearly. We've reduced communication over the last 6 months, which is a long time to go without telling people. That's another thing, is the lack of communication about the actual progress. They always say, oh, it's too hard to actually say how far along we are and how close we are to completing the game. I really feel like it's not that hard. Like, I've never made a game, but it cannot be that hard to give some sort of update. Like, let us know what mechanics of the game are finished and just need a little polishing up, what mechanics are being worked on, what mechanics haven't been done yet. Like, does multiplayer work? If so, how well? Have you gotten all the mobs that you plan to put in the game? All the mobs and creatures and NPCs, are they all there? Does the player function the way they need to, or does there need to be more progress made on that? How's the world gen going? How is the story integrated into the game? Is that finished yet? Like, you can give some sort of idea. Like, just say what parts have been finished and what parts haven't. Give us some sort of idea about how much progress you've made. But I think they didn't do that because they weren't making very much progress, and so they didn't want to let us know that, because that would kill their hype and get them probably less funding, I guess, because less people would be interested in the game. I'm not sure. But at any rate, they didn't want to admit how little progress they were actually making. So, long story short, they should have just stuck with their original idea for the game, released that, and then after that, they can do all the changes they want with updates. You know, if they hadn't completely finished their in-game modding scripting thing, then they could have added that in an update. They changed world gen a couple times, which is odd because I feel like I saw the same post twice. Which one was the one talking about the biomes? Is this it? They're talking about their new engine. Spring 2025. Engine progress. Internal playtesting. I actually heard someone talk about one of the playtesters talking about their experience testing the game, and from the sounds of it, it was very close to finished. At least some parts of it were, the basic parts. They were playing multiplayer, and they said that everyone was having a ton of fun with it. So clearly it's, like, even if they just released it in that state as an early access, that probably would have been enough. At least if they polished up all the rough edges and just added it so it's not a complete game, but what there is of the game is complete. Like, polish up everything that you currently have before adding new stuff, and then you can just release it as maybe a tech demo. Because a lot of times the demos of games will just be the first little bit of the game and nothing else after that, and they'll just work on the rest of it instead of working on the whole thing little bit by little bit at a time, but it's still functionally unplayable until the very end, rather than focusing on finishing what they already started before moving on to new things, which I can't guarantee that's how it worked, that's how they're doing it, but it seems like that's the case. Here we go. They're talking about these zones. Now they're talking about the lore of the game. That's not what I was looking for. But they changed the world gen, so instead of generating biomes randomly, they each generated in a like a ring from the spawn. So the first biome you get is grasslands, then after that maybe a swamp, then maybe ice, stuff like that. The further out you go, the more biomes you encounter. And they change that. Either they change it to or from that. From to or from changing the biomes to just spawn randomly. I don't remember which one they settle on, but I feel like they made the same post talking about that twice, but I can't find the first one, and I feel like I'm going crazy. And it's not just the Mandela effect. It's not just... It might be the Mandela effect, but it's not... It's definitely not deja vu, because I mean, I can tell the difference between deja vu and a thought I've had in my mind for actual months. And I feel like they made the same post about that. But that's beside the point. So I think I've covered about everything. Scope creep, the poor communication, which, to be honest, Silksong also has that problem. Like, they have to at least give us some kind of idea of how far along they are. Like, they don't need to do it in terms of when is the game going to release, but just tell us how much of the game has been finished, how much is being worked on, how much still hasn't been done at all. And also telling us whether it was... like, whether they're working on making the first part of the game, finishing the basic parts up completely, and then moving on to more parts, or if they were just trying to do a little bit of everything all at once so that every aspect of the game finishes development at the same time. That would have been nice to know. So, too long, didn't watch. They expanded the scope of the game, like, multiple times, I think. So they changed their mind on what they originally wanted the game to be. If they originally stuck with their original ideas, then it probably would have been out in, like, 2022, maybe? 2021, perhaps, even? But they didn't do that. And they kept expanding the scope. They were acquired by Riot, which I can't imagine that would help at all. Just adds more red tape and bureaucracy to it. The original devs were kind of constrained with the expansion of the team, and therefore they spent less time actually working on the game. And then, of course, the biggest problem was them literally deleting all their progress and starting over. If we look here at my Twitter, in 2022, back in 2022, I said, can't wait for them to tell us everything in the previous post is invalid because they deleted all their code and are starting over. This was, I believe, before the new engine was even announced. And there's another update a few years afterwards, I think in 24, where they made a new post, and I said, oh cool, did they delete all their progress and start over again? And I don't remember if that was after after they changed the language, the coding language of the game. And then I retweeted that with, this aged unfathomably well. So let's actually finish by looking up at this. Game development, this is the post that announced it. As our vision evolved and the genre matured around us, the bar kept rising. No, the bar is not rising at all. Good games are good games regardless of when they're released. There's still people playing multiple decades old games. Our technical ambitions grew more complex. Again, just start slow, don't overdo it. Even after a major reboot of the game engine, the team found the Hytale wasn't as far along as it needed to be. Probably because of the major reboot of the game engine. You literally deleted your progress. We looked at reducing scope, apparently not, adjusting timelines and finding new angles to keep moving forward, but each of those options would have made compromising on what made Hytale special in the first place. It doesn't matter how special. It wouldn't have been the game we set out to make, and it wouldn't have been the game you deserve. Okay, well now it's not a game at all, which is objectively worse. And then here it says, we still believe in Hytale. Clearly that's not true because the game was shut down. if you still believed in it, then you'd still be working on it. And I don't know how they managed to get the funding to spend 6 years doing literally nothing, or well, producing literally nothing anyway. And I don't know if Riot was the ones that ended development of the studio, or if it was the original devs themselves. Again, don't hate on anyone involved here. I'm criticizing what they did, not them as people, and they shouldn't be bullied about it. Because some people are bullying them, which isn't good. So, I think that's about it. Lessons to learn from this: communicate better with your fans. Don't release a trailer until your game is almost completely finished. And don't delete all your code and start over in a new engine halfway through the development. So that's what I think about the update. Bit of a long video, but I just ramble a lot and repeat the same things I've already said because I want to make sure that I've gotten my point across properly, and I worry that I haven't made myself understood well enough. So let me know if that's the case, or if I was just needlessly repeating stuff. I feel like it was the second one. And honestly, I expected this, and I'm kind of surprised it took this long for them to do it. So hopefully we'll have another game. Maybe this will inspire someone to make their own game like this. Maybe, depending on who has the rights to the game, maybe the devs will pick this up as their own personal... Maybe the original devs will pick this up again as their own personal project, and we'll actually get to see it get made. Don't count on that, though, because the chances of that are basically 0%, or it would have been cancelled. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you stuck around for this long, please leave a comment. I want to hear what you have to say about both my video, the way I presented it, and the news about Hytale itself. Oh, and one more thing. This was... Not only did they let their team down, they let tens of millions of fans down. There's so many people that have said, I was in middle school when the trailer dropped and I'm graduating college now. That's a little ridiculous. And there's a lot of people that were relying on it. There were multiple channels dedicated to Hytale, a game that had not released yet. There was masses of fan art for something that had never released. They completely dropped the ball here. So if you ever make a game, don't do any of this. Keep the scope small to start with. You can always add a little bit more time later. You gotta... What's that phrase about, like, you can't eat an elephant in one bite or something? So, that's all I can think of to say. Thanks for watching. Outro words. Bye.